This episode of our This Week in XR podcast is sponsored by Zapper. Zapper is one of the world's leading XR companies. Over the past 12 years, they've won numerous awards for memorable campaigns. They've democratized AR by making tools and SDKs that anyone can use. And they created ZapBox, the world's most affordable mixed reality headset. Most recently, Zapper worked with Unilever to create an enhanced QR code called Accessible QR, which enables packaged goods to speak to the blind and partially sighted. If you're thinking XR, give the team at Zapper a call or visit zapper.com to see how they can help you on your XR journey.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Charlie Fink with Ted Schilowitz for This Week in XR for July 26, 2024. Our guest is neuroscientist Dr. Cody Rall, which makes it even sadder that Rony is not with us today. Ted.
Yeah, I know.
I recruited that guy for Rony.
I know, and now Rony can't make it this week. Well, we all have other things to do other than
I know. Rony's got a real job. I don't know what that says about us.
Well, I think real jobs are overrated.
Friday mornings at 11 a.m. I guess people have something to do on the East Coast.
As we know, most people listen to this, and most of the time I'm the one on the road in some crazy configuration. But for anybody watching the YouTube version of our podcast, it looks like Charlie is like testifying in front of a courthouse today. I'm not sure.
No, I'm in the lobby of the Beacon Hotel in San Francisco.
There you go.
So a rare vacation for me.
Very nice.
Anyway, let's get to the news. Some really interesting stuff, including yesterday, the announcement of Search GPT.
Yeah, pretty interesting, huh?
Google had a great earnings call yesterday, and their stock still went down. So they haven't faced too much competition over the years, except for perhaps Perplexity, although they haven't eaten much of Google's traffic, as the earnings report showed. They also are showing a very profitable subscription business for their Google Gemini AI. So it looks like Google is in good shape, except for the challengers. I kind of expected this a while ago. And when it wasn't happening, I was thinking, well, maybe they feel like they don't need to do it. But, it's obviously a huge challenge to Google. Everybody wants answers, not a list of things they need to click through.
Right.
So Cohere. Sorry, go ahead.
This is where I was wholly wrong about my prediction that the paid services for all of these AI agents would fall by the wayside, and the dominant form would be ad supported, which would then sort of be at odds with the purity of the information. But it looks like, at least according to the reports, Gemini is generating a little bit of a profit. Like there's enough people that want to pay for this that are willing to pay for it. And I guess maybe we should have learned from the paid version of YouTube that removes the ads and the paid version of most streaming services that remove the ads. I think there's really two kinds of customers, ones that will accept the ads and ones that are not willing to put up with that nonsense and have a little extra capital and are willing to pay for the services they want. So I think that's a good trend moving forward. I'm excited about it.
So also in the news, Cohere, another AI startup valued at $5.5 billion, raises a Series D, $500 million. It's really, really expensive to build these giant AI models and then to run them for queries, which is one of the reasons I'm surprised that Google's business has already turned profitable. We know that OpenAI makes over, I think, $3 billion a year, I guess, on their subscription service. So that's a lot of money, again, for a company that is, in the case of OpenAI, they're 7 years old or 8 years old, but they're still a startup. Right. They're privately held. So pretty incredible. Good luck to Cohere there. Cohere is on the enterprise side of AI. So,
well, here's the question for you, Charlie. How many of these large language models do we humans need? I mean, I get that there's investor froth and people are putting money into, let's build another one. Let's build another one. I mean, I don't really understand it. I mean, how much human knowledge is there actually, and is there a real differentiation between what OpenAI is doing, what Google is doing, what Anthropic is doing, now what these guys are doing?
This week there was a list in TechCrunch of 28 U.S. AI startups that have raised $100 million or more.
All to
and
build large language models?
just about, yeah,
So
just
help me
about
understand this.
for specialized things.
Help me, please. I don't understand why we need so many of these things.
I mean, there are going to be a lot of really expensive failures, Ted. I
I
think
guess
there's.
so.
I mean, look at all the image generation: Runway, Pika, Hapier now, Sora. You know, the list goes on and on. I mean,
Yeah.
these companies are going to get absorbed or closed, but there's no way they can exist as independent entities.
Yeah.
So here we go. XAI. Speaking of spending billions of dollars,
Oh yes, our friend Elon and all things Elon. Yes.
he's opened a gigafactory in Memphis, which is a city that could really use more tech business, and they were quite happy about it until they figured out that the gigafactory will use 50 megawatts of electricity and 1.3 gallons of water.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so apparently they're building a facility in an old steel plant, not Musk, I think Google, building a facility in Illinois in one of the old steel plants on Lake Michigan because they need the water.
The
I
water.
don't know
Yeah.
where they're going to get the power. I guess it's and by the way, Musk doesn't either. He said he and the city are mulling over where to get the power.
You know, we should. There's a startup I was investigating called Caruso, kind of like Robinson Crusoe, the name Caruso, and they have an interesting thesis. We should try and get them on the show. They're working on solving this problem by building data centers next to power plants. So next to
Yeah,
the place that power gets generated, which is typically kind of in the middle of nowhere where nobody wants to live. You build the actual data center and you slough off the excess power that's generated that they can't transport. You know, when the demands change, there's literally power that literally they just exit into the atmosphere. They can't use it. So, you know, Vegas has huge hydroelectric stuff. There's big solar farms all over different parts of the world where there's a lot of sun. Maybe this concept will catch on and we will at least start to solve the problem of these data centers by why don't you just park them where the power is as opposed to trunking the power to other places.
I don't think no matter what your proximity is, that it's enough.
You can never
So
solve it.
my prediction is you're going to see a lot of new nuclear power plants,
Hmm.
and and we'll see if the same uproar uh, happens as happened in the 70s after 3 Mile Island. They stopped building nuclear plants in the
Yeah, I mean,
U.S.
there's two sides to that argument. One is that well, nuclear's come a long way, and we figured out how to make it safe. And then the other argument is, are you sure? Because every time you say that, there's a problem, right? So
I don't know whether solar can get there for these kinds of power demands all over the world.
yeah, of
So here's a fun one. Colin Kaepernick, you remember this guy? Civil
course I
rights
remember this
activist.
guy. I'm a big sports fan.
Civil rights activist who got booted out of the NFL. NFL didn't reinstate him. He got a settlement. He's quite wealthy now. And Kaepernick just announced a startup called Lumi Story. He raised $4 million, and I guess Lumi Story is going to help people to make media like comic books. In fact, that's where they're starting. So he's trying to democratize storytelling. Again, it's another startup. There are so many of these that are going to help you storyboard. They're going to help you write a screenplay. They're going to help you write a novel. And I don't think this is the first one to concentrate on comics either.
Yeah, well, and unfortunately, comics of the purest form are the least economically viable part of the comic book universe. What gets made from comics, aka Marvel, which you know in its heyday was very, very profitable and still holds its own, is what the real sort of win is. Comics, you know, the ones you and I used to buy in the
Yeah,
grocery store on the thing,
for
are a
10 cents.
teeny little business and probably will never be more than that. So unless they kind of pivot or use that core for something more beneficial to a wider audience, it will sort of be a little pimple. But you know, kind of cute that it's happening. I mean, it's you know, it's kind of nice. He's got something going on. I guess it's
Yeah,
kind of fun to watch.
I like the guy. I wish him
Yeah,
success.
yeah,
Um,
me too.
so, Meta, there's so much meta news every week. You know, they're a social company, so they like to talk about what they're doing.
Yeah, we
I
could just
guess
do a podcast just on meta news every week, right?
I'm getting a little tired of it because they're eating my beat.
Mm,
And I really don't want to talk about them that much, but
yeah,
they make it impossible, and so it's working.
yeah,
So they released Llama 3, their most powerful model. Llama 3.1 also powers Meta AI in Messenger and on WeChat, and also their Meta.ai, which is their free AI online, is doing extremely well.
Yeah.
Although they don't, probably because they don't charge for it.
Yeah.
So it's open source. I think that was the big excitement about it. Open source means you can download it from the web and basically modify it as you see fit. You still, if it's a commercial use and you make over $1 million, I think that's the threshold you have to start paying.
Yeah, it's like the Epic Games model is.
Yeah,
Once you start making real money, they'll ask you for a part of it. Yeah.
And what's more, this Llama 3 powered applications also can do image prompts. So all you have to say is "imagine me," and it will create images on the fly, which I got to check out. That sounds like fun. Meanwhile, Meta is having trouble with all of its XR devices except for the one that they make with Luxottica, the Ray-Bans.
Ray-Bans, yeah.
So it looks like they're going to invest $5 billion into Luxottica, and the condition is that they don't work with anybody else.
Right. They're trying to buy some exclusivity in that sector of these quote unquote smart glasses, although there are plenty of other companies that will build versions of smart glasses. But, look, the Ray-Bans are working. I mean, we saw them at the Connect festival up at the campus last year, and they're starting to become somewhat mainstream. People are
love mine. I love mine, and if you integrated AI, I don't even know if I would need the display, to be honest, because I'm still carrying my smartphone around. Yeah. So why would I need the display, on my face? So I think that's a big change that may come, although Meta has been saying that they are going to put displays in them. I don't know what kind of, we'll see. Display is so hard. And then you have the battery issue and everything else. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Then they have to be tethered. It's very complicated. And so I think partly as a result of the performance of the division, Reality Labs is going to get cut substantially, it looks like, perhaps as much as 20%. So they're really pulling back their expenses. They've criticized heavily for them on Wall Street. But actually, Ted, I don't doubt that Zuckerberg's commitment to the metaverse has remained strong, but it's resource allocation.
Yeah, of course.
They're going to make these multi-billion-dollar investments in AI. It's hard to make a multi-billion-dollar investment in XR, especially when it's going so slowly for them.
Right. Well, and I've talked on this podcast and other places about right-sizing technology investments from large, multi-trillion-dollar companies. And the one thing we see over and over again with the excitement of new technologies and new sectors is these large companies want to try and own that sector, want to try and corner the market. So they overfund, they over-resource, they overbuild to a market that's not really real yet. And organically building something correctly is really smart. For all the critique you and I and others have put on Apple for such an expensive device that has so many flaws, if you think about how smart Apple is as a company, and let's put our conspiracy hats on for a moment, is it such that they know they don't want to overbuild this market? They understand how small and segmented this market is, and they price it accordingly to build over a long-term curve.
You bring up a really good point, Ted. Both Meta and Apple are public companies.
Yeah.
Meta is disclosing its expenses on XR development, but Apple never has. Why is that?
Well, because Apple can obfuscate it across their entire tech landscape, right? So they don't, like that device that's sitting right behind me and the others that I have, they don't break that out as a specific division or separate part of their technology company. It is part of their tech ecosystem. Just like the Apple AirPods that you're wearing now, if you broke that out as a business, it would be a gigantic business. It would be worth like $500 billion. It'd be worth more than most companies just selling freaking earphones, right?
Right.
But it lives inside now their $3.4 trillion valuation as part of that tech sector. And they, as a company, don't view a Vision Pro device any differently than they view AirPods or an iPhone or a MacBook Pro. It's just a Mac, right? And therefore they don't have to be so specific on where they make and lose money. It's just their entire enterprise is investing in technology, returning that investment into their customers' products that they love and enjoy, and they see a profit from that. So, they do break out. You can see how much they make on their iPhone hardware. You can see how much they make on their software stack with all things iOS. They break that out accordingly. You can tell how much money they're making selling laptops versus selling iPhones. They make a lot more money selling iPhones than laptops. They do break it out. But conceptually they look at it in terms of their investment very differently than Meta does.
So speaking of companies that overbuilt and underperformed, I'm kind of glad Rony is not here so we can talk about Magic Leap shutting sales and marketing. They're on their third CEO. I guess they shut their sales operations so that they could focus on licensing. There's been rumors that they're licensing their display technology to Meta, which I hope is true because they need a Hail Mary to get caught at this point before even the Saudis tire of this game.
Yeah.
And that would really, really be a loss and a shame. Anyway, let me bring Cody in. There are other stories. You can find them in the column this week. I also dropped something this week about cinematic AI, which includes a cats washing dishes. So for those of you who read my Forbes stories, there is a fun one. Cody Rall, Dr. Cody Rall, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host, Ted. And
Ted.
Thanks for taking the time. I'm so disappointed that our podcast third co-host, Rony Abovitz, isn't here since he is actually a bioengineer and neuroscientist himself, as you are. So when I saw your YouTube channel filled with compelling videos about BCI, brain-computer interface, I knew we had to have you on the podcast. So thank you for coming on. And before we jump into the middle of a conversation about BCI, maybe you could tell us a little bit more about yourself, since many of our listeners are probably not acquainted with your work.
Yeah, I'm actually a psychiatrist by training. I went to medical school at the Chicago Medical School and then did my residency training with the U.S. Navy at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. And I got extremely interested in brain scans at that point because we had veterans coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan with these psychiatric symptoms like anxiety, but also dizziness, tinnitus, and they had been exposed to blasts overseas. And some of the latest brain imaging technology could actually see tears in the axons of their brains at a level that had never been seen before. So you had a biological marker for psychiatric symptoms. And I got obsessed with collecting data about the brain. I mean, we try to treat the brain, we use the DSM that doesn't really use any objective data to make diagnoses. And when I saw that wearables were coming along that could get data on brainwaves, but also blood flow patterns, I became obsessed and just started making YouTube videos about it ever since.
Well, you're also a bit of a kind of a media professional as well. Like I checked out your YouTube channel and it is loaded with videos, and you're pretty smart about marketing them with sort of salacious titles and your face wearing all this stuff. And you've kind of figured out the media side of how to attract people to an emerging science and technology and make it a little less kind of boring and challenging. It seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like you're trying to lower the bar to entry, like let it be more normalized, let it be more interesting and fun. Would you say that's correct?
I've had a lot of training on how YouTube works as a platform just to, get more exposure and also raise awareness of what's going on. And so you do have to walk that line between clickable titles and also not overselling the technology, but also not making people fearful of the technology, which has become more of a problem in the last couple of years as people have gotten a lot of fear around AI. And then I do see this as an extension of that. What can AI do with our brain data? And it's been a really interesting last 2 years in that regards.
Well, I think a lot of the fear comes from a trend of designing these devices to be implantable, right? And there are obviously certain patients and things where you're trying to solve very severe problems where they have, body challenges and issues where an implant is going to actually work. But I think there's also a little bit of talk about the psychology and psychiatry of all this, as you would know. There's a fear factor when something is now invasive in your body versus putting it on top of your skull and tracking, brain function that way. So I think that hopefully is a trend you're trying to fight against as well, like trying to show people that this stuff is not going to hurt you. It might not help you, but it's definitely not going to hurt you in terms of if you're not going to put, embed it into your body.
Yeah, I think one of the things I'm going to start exploring on the channel a bit more, though, is that that's not necessarily true because you can have magnetic pulses from
Mm.
transmagnetic stimulation affect the brain, as well as direct electrical stimulation from devices that are not even implanted in your brain. I've been looking a little bit more into Havana syndrome, for example. 60 Minutes has done a slew of episodes on that. They think that there's some kind of weapon that a foreign government can use to actually target people. So, I think that the concerns are valid. I don't think that people understand that it can't be as nuanced as controlling your thoughts from a device outside of your head. But I think that the distinctions need to be made of yes, there are weapons probably out there, but also treatment options that can influence your mood through ultrasound or magnetic pulses. I even had that done to me in a lab last summer. They had these ultrasound pucks that they targeted with a brain MRI to my caudate, which is a structure in the basal ganglia of your brain, kind of near the brainstem, that made me euphoric when they stimulated me.
Oh,
But yeah, it was an incredible experience, and I can talk about that more if you guys would like. But
Oh, sure.
affecting things like mood, but also, I mean, some of those TMS studies, transmagnetic stimulation studies, are extremely interesting. It's even pointing to influencing decision making. As you can imagine, if you influence someone's mood, it can influence decision making as well, but not anywhere near thought control that people are really concerned about
yeah.
with those that are unfamiliar with the capabilities of the technology right now.
Well, we also know at baseline science, paint colors affect people's moods. The types of environments that people are asked to stay in affect people's moods extensively. The idea of locking someone in an office without windows or proper ventilation. All these things create depression, right, and create real stressors on people. And you were in the military, so you would probably know about some of the places they ask military to be in for long periods of time that can cause things that are long lasting, right? So that's external forces that aren't really touching directly your brain, but are touching kind of your overall stimulation centers. When you're talking about putting devices on your, on or in your brain, I think there's no question that you can extraordinarily powerfully influence what people's brains do and think, right? Which you've probably proven over and over again.
Well, I think that a lot of the devices that I use here in the studio are more data collection devices, and I think that they have a ton of utility. For example, when I was in the Navy, I pushed for a congressional grant to have a mood and meditation tracker on people that were actually deployed on ships, and that actually didn't get approved as a study. It was really disappointing. It was one of the reasons I got out of the military because I was thinking this stuff will come along. It'll get more of a better reputation with time to do really good neuroscience studies, but I'm going to go do my own thing for a while. And really, in the last 3 years that I've been out, it's actually made incredible progress. But for now, it's mostly data collection devices. But it is really getting to the point where legislation even is being passed, like the Colorado Privacy Act is one of the first pieces of legislation to say, hey, these devices are getting increasingly powerful. We need protection for people's brain data. This should be brought in under, how genetic data is expected to be managed these days with encryption, secure data storage facilities, and also rights, people's consumer rights to be able to access their brain data and know what these companies are doing with it. Because we wouldn't want things to progress to the point of people being discriminated for insurance, or even getting down the sci-fi path of lie detection. That type of thing is coming along as well.
You mean like all the things we do with other forms of computers today? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I do talk about on my YouTube channel is that a lot of this is issues in other areas as well. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Neurotechnology is not going to, um, you know, be completely different from what's going on already. So we might as well use the technology to make medical diagnostics and improve mental health, and then all the other things that we can do with productivity. There's so many different things that we can do with it.
Cody, there's a friend of ours, Marin Gribbets, who was on the show last year. His company is called Inner Cosmos. I don't know if you're familiar with what this startup is doing, but I just got an email from Marin because he's a piggy for press. And now that we're acquainted, he's constantly bombing me. But he just revealed that they had used their system, which is just a little subdermal magnet that you have an external as well as the subdermal, that connects to the exterior, and you use a smartphone to track the patient's moods and brain activity. And it was made for the severely depressed, right? It's made for depressed people who are resistant to the typical Zoloft and other drugs that are that are prescribed. And of course, somebody who is that severely depressed is marginally functional, is doesn't want to get out of bed, and they've been having success with those people. Just providing electrical stimulation to the right part of the brain. As you said, you can induce euphoria. It's not, on the brain center itself, but somehow they've figured out how to use that particular site on the head to reach those parts of the brain. So I think that's a very exciting development. The other crazy thing that I would love to get your opinion on is what is happening with Neuralink. I mean, we love to talk about Elon and ridicule him, and he needs to be brought down a few notches just because I think he's been culled from the vast herd of humanity and thinks he's really in touch and is actually completely out of touch. But BCI, and in particular Neuralink, sounds like they're making revolutionary progress.
Yeah, they fall in the category of these implantables, and there's quite a few different implantable companies. There's BlackRock Neurotech, there's Synchron, and they're looking at different areas of the brain to mostly within the motor cortex to be able to control mouse cursors with your thoughts, for example, which is what Neuralink has done initially with their first human trial. And I think that some people don't realize that although it's amazing, don't get me wrong, it's amazing technology. It's also somewhat limited to the motor cortex at this point. Of course, someone who is paralyzed that needs to navigate the internet and select different buttons on a language generator, that type of thing. It's revolutionary, really. But there are other companies that are doing something similar, and it's not anywhere near being able to read a person's thoughts or control their mind, that type of thing. So I think that is one thing that I do talk about, is that Neuralink in particular is limited to things like the motor cortex, and that there are actually a lot of different things that we could do with wearable technologies, like a full head helmet coverage. For example, picking up the blood flow patterns from the back of the head and projecting images with our minds. Those are things that we could do with wearable technologies that actually implantables like Neuralink cannot do. It's just it's sort of an apples and oranges thing.
Do you also, as a sort of byproduct of your study around this neurological sort of science and work, do you study microhallucinogenics and microdosing and other forms of how we access the brain? Because I've seen lots of studies of, things that the perception of psychedelics sort of took a very dark path when we were kids. And now there's a new version, a new science of just very, very small doses under very strict physician control and management that actually have extraordinary benefits on resetting brain chemistry of people that are really in debilitating states. And I'm wondering if there's a link, a neural link to that sort of Meg, between what you're doing, the study you're doing, and the micropsychedelics side of the equation.
Yeah, I'm actually going to start working with a ketamine clinic that's in both Colorado and Texas. They're called Clarisana. I'm really excited to start my partnership with them. There's a lot of crossover between neurotech and psychedelics right now, because the psychedelic field is trying to gain credibility and also be, you would think that psychedelics are trendy, which they are, but neurotech I think is even more trendy. So some of these clinics are trying to, combine the two. And one of the things that I came across was that psychedelics, in terms of brain patterns, almost scramble your brain waves. When you look at the brain waves, there's something called permutation entropy, which is a measure of how random the brainwave signals are. And what you find is that people that take psychedelics like ketamine, which is the FDA-approved psychedelic for depression at this point, you actually get increased entropy of the brainwaves, which is really interesting. And I was Not able to do that here in my clinic, but what I was able to do is that there are some products that do flickering light. There's some studies out of MIT right now that are in clinical trials actually for stimulating the human brain with about 40 oscillations per second light flickering, 40 hertz. And what it's shown in rat and mice models is that it actually turns on uh, the immune system of the brain and clears out amyloid plaques,
Really?
improving
Wow.
Alzheimer's models. And they've actually gotten some initial data on human patients showing that they had increased facial recognition, better daily task performance. So, long story short, I had one of these light flickering devices in my office here, and one of the things that they advertise is that there's a microdosing psychedelic effect. Now, I don't know how much crossover there was, but I was able to use ChatGPT to actually calculate that yes, the flickering lights increase permutation entropy, just like the psychedelic
Hmm.
studies show.
A non-chemical version of that.
Yeah,
Wow.
and if you
So it's
think about it,
possible.
if you think about it, it's like people with depression get into these really rigid thought patterns and are unable to break out of that. And that's
Sure.
one of the reasons why they say that psychedelics are very helpful is they help you see outside of the box, help you see things from different perspectives. And that's actually reflected in the brainwave and blood flow patterns with
So
So
empathy.
Charlie, it's possible.
is that a way you treat PTSD?
Yes, there are studies being done with psychedelics and PTSD. Unfortunately, I have a friend that's doing MDMA studies at Stanford, and a lot of his research is in behavioral rat models. But it went to the FDA here recently, and the FDA actually shot it down for the initial push with MDMA studies. A lot of people said that that's not the fact that MDMA is not helpful in PTSD. It's just that the company and the group that put together the studies and went to the FDA didn't have quite enough evidence yet, or wasn't high quality enough evidence. But
Are
I
you
think it will come
familiar?
along.
Are you familiar with the work that Skip Rizzo at USC is doing with the VA?
I know of he's at Stanford, right? He does a lot of
No,
virtuality
he's
work.
at
USC.
the USC.
Oh,
The
okay.
Balinson is at Stanford. But what
Yes, yep.
he did was he hacked an old video game that takes place in the Middle East, and so they can on the fly run simulations that are tied to the traumatizing event, and there is talk therapy going on where the therapist can control the simulation and also talk to the patient while they're having the experience. And what they found was that it extremely elevated the effectiveness of talk therapy and desensitizing the memory so that the precipitating event, uh, in the way Skip explains it, sort of creates a furrow in the brain. And so they have these obsessive thoughts about the precipitating incident or what they experienced around it, and they can't stop. And no medication can stop the obsession and the bad dreams and loss of sleep and everything that comes along with it. So, but Rizzo's method has been effective enough for them to deploy it in several dozen locations. So they are taking it very, very seriously as a way to, if not completely heal the brain, at least redirect those furrows away from the obsessive thoughts about the violence.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really exciting. They tried to do a lot of virtuality studies even 10 years ago when I was in the military, and I think that what they found is that they used to try to just do exposure therapy where they were exposing people to the event again and again and again. And I shouldn't laugh because it probably really re-traumatized some people,
Yes.
being exposed over and over. So the idea is that you expose them to the event or even have them recall the memory of the event. And there's even these wild molecular studies that show that there are proteins that are expressed that when you recall a memory, it actually opens up the memory pathways, and that provides a window to sort of restructure the understanding of the event. So um, I think it ties in with what you're talking about. It's really exciting research.
Yeah,
Um,
I was gonna say, Charlie, when and we were talking about the micro flashing lights, and you would think, oh, is that really real? Well, for many, many years now, generations, we have little warnings on TV shows when they use strobe lights or any kind of lighting effect that says if you, and video games have to deal with this too, if you have epilepsy in some form, you need to be aware that this type of show is going to do these kind of flashing lights and can actually affect a certain small portion of the society, of the population. A lot of kids that don't even know they have a tendency to lean toward any kind of epileptic seizure or event, and those lights can trigger it. So we know this is a real thing, right? What I was curious about is these lights that you're talking about. Is this something you can perceive visually, or are they flashing so fast that you don't even see them, that only your sort of inner cortex and optics sees them, but it just doesn't look like anything to you? Like if Charlie and I were to test it, what would it look like to us? That would be I was curious about.
If you close your eyes and you have 40 hertz stimulation going, it's a little less than constant light. It flickers like a little bit. The device that I
It wouldn't be
have,
annoying. It wouldn't be like watching strobe lights. It would be, it wouldn't, you wouldn't perceive it as a, yikes, I don't like that.
correct. Yeah, those strip lights are probably going about 10 to 20
Yeah, very slow.
hertz, so it's a little faster than that.
Yeah. Interesting. Wow.
Cody, you mentioned that you have, well, there are two things I wanted to ask you about. So the first is I want to hear more about your clinic, which is obviously your day job as opposed to YouTube. And so why don't we start there? But I also want to get back to ketamine and what you're doing with that.
Yeah, what I was doing a lot of was neurofeedback training with my clients. So I have my telemedicine clinic that is actually not associated with my YouTube channel at all. I still practice mainstream psychiatry. I'm transitioning that into the ketamine clinic here in the coming months. But for years, I've had this neurofeedback clinic where I use the Muse headband with an extra electrode that you can plug into the top of the module. It was recently featured on the Netflix quarterback special. Kirk Cousins was using it. It's called Mind Lift. And what I would do is I would get quantitative EEG measurements of my clients and see where their brain waves were at. You get these heat maps where you can see where it's overactive and underactive, and then prescribe them training regimens, neurofeedback training regimens to help equalize their brainwave patterns. And there's a wide degree of this isn't doing anything to me to like this really helps. So, and one of the challenging things with that as a provider is that people have to be really invested in the training. They need to do, the 20 to 30 minutes every day of the neurofeedback training. And I've found that it's difficult to implement from a clinical perspective as opposed to just prescribing a pill that they take every day, or, they take ketamine once or twice a week. So it's been challenging, especially managing the technology remotely, because a lot of people that want to undergo neurofeedback training aren't, huge tech experts, and there's some things that go along with that are difficult with managing your smartphone or your tablet with the technology. But I learned a lot, and I think the technology continues to come along. I've taken a break on that program a little bit over the last couple of months just to transition into the ketamine clinic, as well as put out more YouTube videos. But it's an ongoing process for me.
So what about ketamine? I mean, talk to us a little bit about what ketamine is and what it does and why some people abuse it. And because I don't know anything about it. Is it like mushrooms or?
Well, one of the advantages of ketamine is that the onset offset is a lot quicker than magic mushrooms, right? So if you took some of these other psychedelics like magic mushrooms or LSD, you could have someone who's altered for 12 hours or more. Ketamine is much better controlled over a couple of hours. So I think it's gained favor for that reason in the clinical setting, where it can be a lot better controlled in terms of dosage as well as duration of effect. And it has a lot of similar properties where it changes perception, but also people think that it leads to increased neurogenesis of the brain, seeing things from different perspectives, as well as one of the most significant effects is turning off internal dialogue that people struggle with. That's actually how a lot of psych medications work, in my opinion, is they actually turn down the noise of what you call the default mode network, which is that self dialogue of uh, my struggles, trials, tribulations, just me all the time, instead of stepping outside of themselves and turning off that internal dialogue. So it does a lot of different things, and I'm excited to start that work. I wouldn't
Shit,
consider
I'm going to do ketamine, baby.
Yeah. I mean, Elon Musk came out publicly saying that he was doing ketamine, so for whatever that means.
There's a reason they call it Special K, Charlie. It's,
Yeah. And that's the other side of things. I've talked to some providers that swear up and down they will never prescribe ketamine. They don't want anything to do with it. That was more like it used to be used for chronic pain back in the day, and that was more anesthesiologists that I heard complaining about it.
yeah.
Psychiatrists have been a little bit more excited about it, I think, just because it's been a while since we've had a big change in our tool set for treating mental illness, and I think that because of that, it is exciting to have a new tool, and it can be very helpful for some certain
Well,
people.
the thing that makes it so valuable is dose control now, right? The fact that you can actually, there's studies on what levels of dosage for what body weight and sort of fat chemistry that people have in their bodies that can actually measure how much is too much versus how much is not enough. Whereas with a truly organic substance like mushrooms, you don't really know. Like you could just give somebody a tiny little bit and you take them over the rails, and other people have no effect at all with the same exact dosage. So with a chemical substance that has a chemical structure, they can measure it. At least this is what I've read. So this is why it becomes more like other FDA approved drugs. It's because it's a known substance that you can control dosage of, right? It's like it would be a really bad idea for me and Charlie to take 20 Advil at the same time, all three of us. But it's probably not as bad of an idea for us to take one. Although for certain people like me, it's really not a good idea to take Advil at all, right? So you have to know that. And with a drug, when it's measured and built with chemical synthesis, just like any other drug, I think you have to remove the stigma from it, right? And unfortunately, these sort of psychotropic type things have had a stigma attached to them that now seems like for the first time, really over the last couple of years, is starting to get removed because there's so many success stories that are shown of people that have such debilitating brain trauma and brain problems. Like you said, they can't get out of their own thoughts. Like there's that famous phrase, you are not your thoughts, you are you. But people that are in this problem are their thoughts all the time and they can't break free of it. And they've tried everything. They've tried super dulling drugs that just knock them down to nothing, right? And this apparently works. So it's really interesting.
I'm glad you brought this up, Ted, because it seems to me one of the things that may cause that is the work from home. Right?
Yeah,
you
sure.
just sit there by yourself. I mean, I've been working from home for almost 20 years. And I can tell you, sometimes having yourself as your coworker is not ideal.
No wonder why you're so nuts, Charlie. No wonder why I love you so much.
I know. I'm so happy to do the podcast because I get to hang out with you.
Because actually, when we make jokes about it, but Charlie and I have actually said this. This is a form of therapy for me and Charlie and Rony. Just the idea that we can gather together and bring interesting people on, learn new things every week. It's educational, stimulating, and viable for us as the hosts. And we also know, because we get a lot of good feedback from our audience, from our listeners, that they like it too. They like the candor and the camaraderie. But Charlie would tell you just as much as I do, this is beneficial. There is a brain chemistry thing that happens, whether you gather in real life or in video, as long as you're with compatriots, with people you like, doing things you like, that's actually very pleasing on the brain. Like I leave my hour of this going, that was fun. It was interesting. I learned something today every week or almost every week.
I agree 100%. I've been out of the Navy for 3 years working from home. And I can tell you when it heats up here in Vegas and it's 110 out and I can't go out for my walks, I start to go a little stir crazy.
Bonkers, yeah.
It's funny because my dog likes to run around on the concrete patio that we have, and he burns his feet, and he won't go for a walk.
You have to get those little booties, Charlie.
There's no way you're going to get booties.
Not wearing those booties.
But I say to my wife, he's got to go for a walk with me. That guy is not doing his job.
Right, exactly.
His job is to get me away from my computer, and he's not doing his job.
Funny.
Cody, it's been a great conversation. I still have questions about ketamine and other stuff. I'll have to take them offline and Google them up. But it's been great having you on the show. Lots of new information, lots to think about. Your perspective is unique and original. I love the work that you're doing. So thank you. And hopefully we'll have you back on the show soon.
Yeah. Anytime you have a new breakthrough, a new breakthrough or something that you think is worth people knowing about, let us know. We'll bring you back on the show. I think it's a fascinating discussion.
Well, just to close that off, I think that one of the most amazing things has been what these generative language models been able to do with the brain data. And we didn't get much time to talk about that, but I've been just so blown away with what ChatGPT can do with the data that I've been collecting from my brain. Everything from being able to tell that I'm a meditator to if my eyes are open or closed. And there's so many things that are coming from AI with harnessing this data to do really good things for people. So, Charlie and Ted, thanks so much for having me on. Appreciate it.
Great. All right, more to
A
come.
pleasure.
Yeah.
All right, that's our show, everybody. Cody and Ted, have a great weekend, and we'll see you all back here next Friday.
See you in August.
Bye.